Welcome. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Office Hours. Let us know where you're coming in from. And if you are managing client projects currently, I'd love to know what you are already using. So let me know what tech you are already using to manage your client projects. And are you already using Notion to manage your client projects? I know some people are dipping their toe in already. Hey, Ryan, Katrin, Mickey, Mellon's here, another amazing Notion Pro. Chicago, awesome. Heidi, hey Heidi. Jonathan, hopefully Jonathan can help us in the chat too. I know we often get a lot of questions. So how this works is Jason here is going to show us behind the scenes of how he manages his client projects. So Jason and I have been chatting, back and forth over the last couple of months as we've been talking about some specific use cases and kind of how to do some workarounds as we set up our master task databases, but we don't want other clients to kind of see certain information. So how do we do this setup in a way that's really effective and efficient? And Jason and I have very similar setups. So I think the way our brains kind of work with our Notion setup really kind of lends itself well to a client management process. So really wanted to show you Jason's setup. He's got some really neat ways that he's been using Notion. So we'll do a bit of a walkthrough. Jason's going to show us behind the scenes. If you have any questions that come up, especially if they're related to what you're seeing on Jason's screen, definitely use the ask a question area below. I'm going to do my best to kind of keep an eye on those questions. These sessions aren't necessarily really intended for tech support, so we're going to try and keep on task with this particular session, which is all around managing your clients within Notion. So why don't we dig in, and Jason, who's a fellow freelancer, designer, well, not really designer, you're a developer, right? Mm-hmm. And he runs the podcast, Live the Feast?
Live in the Feast.
Live in the Feast. You can find him at rezzz.com with 3 Zs. And so why don't we jump in and you can show us your screen, and
Awesome.
I'll keep my eye on the questions. So let's dive in.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Super excited.
Yeah, so I'm just going to pull up my screen right here. Hopefully everyone can see into that now.
Awesome.
Everything looking good?
Looks good to me.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, so first, thanks, Marie, for having me. I appreciate it. And as I said earlier, I'm only 2 months into this, right? And so really all in. And just I thought it'd be helpful to set some context for the type of client interaction that I have, because obviously it's going to change and suit to everyone's needs and requirements and things of that nature. And so for me and my client management, I used Asana for a very long time. I used Pipedrive as my CRM, and I used Help Scout really for the communication aspect of it. And so those were my 3 core pieces of software. But my clients in and of themselves, when I engage on a project with them, I have regularly scheduled weekly calls with them. I also give them updates every single week, and there's an email that goes out to them. Like I said, we touch base on the phone too. So there's a lot of communication over the course of the week, but most of our communication is via email and sending files back and forth and all the rest of it. And so I've tried to use things like Basecamp, even Asana, bringing my clients into those kind of project management tools, but they all are like, hey, I don't want something else to log into. Can I just email it to you? So that's where Help Scout came into my play, and I would just link Help Scout into my own system on the back end. So I was essentially like a black box, but my clients wanted insight, right? So it was like, okay, well, how do I manage this? And so for a long time, it was just really the weekly Scrum calls and the email updates is how I brought my clients into it. But since Notion came around, for me, I've always wanted this all-inclusive note-taking client management to-do process thing. And so Notion came around, and it's I've given up my bullet journal for this and all of these Evernote and everything else, because Notion is filling the bill. And so for me, if obviously this is my weekly layout. This is where I'm at just pretty much all day long. Probably familiar to a lot of people, especially if you've been watching Marie for any length of time. But what really comes to it is that this is my week layout, right? And so for bullet journal lovers, right, this was always my week layout. And these kind of tasks were the quick to-dos sort of thing, right? Like there was no project around to it. It was just like, hey, I need to reach out to somebody or call somebody. But then, and that was always sitting next to me, like as a bullet journal. Now it's right here, and I could tie it to different things. And then I had my weekly tasks, which was inside of Asana, and communicating in that way. And I'll kind of dive into this a little bit more here, but every single week, I just basically can see my weekly tasks, and I have this as a database, much like, the master database that has tasks for projects, clients, home projects, like everything goes into there. I never actually look at that. There are always these filtered views in a way. And so like this says this week's tasks. It looks like a lot, but it's really just these top bunch at this point, because it's just whatever's within the next week. And so this is obviously next week's stuff. And then I have different views. So, overdue tasks, there's probably a couple in there that just, and then what I've done this week. So every single day at the end of the day, I basically go in and I archive tasks. And this is one of the things that Marie helped me a lot about, was how do I manage tasks and be able to give insight into the tasks that I completed with my clients, but not have them and see my project that, I'm building a shelf in the bathroom. And like, I don't want them to see this sort of stuff. So I'll basically walk you through what a client looks like. And this is just one of my clients. Anytime I get a new client in, they get their own, essentially a record in a database of clients. And this is how my current client list, myself and a whole bunch of other clients. But when I get a brand new client coming in, there's a couple of properties that I like to set, and this is always evolving. And I think that that's a good mention here, is that every single week I'm adding things to this. So that if you're watching this today, if you come back to me like January, it might look different. But I have just some formulas in here too, like lifetime months, because I work on retainer. So this is a brand new client that started this month, whereas some other clients you'll see that started years ago and they have lifetime months. And so it's just a little key to me to say, what am I working on? How long have they been with me? And that sort of thing. And then the thing is I could see what tasks. This is, again, another view of the same database that's linked to this specific project. And I'll get to that in a second. But what's important to me, and has been a complete game changer for me in using Notion in and of itself, is my client portal. And this is that weekly notification, if you will, to clients. And so what happens is this is what the client sees, and they don't have a login. They don't have anything. I just make this public, obviously unlisted, all the rest of it, but it's where they can go to actually get all the information that they have, deliverables, specific links and things of that nature. But this database here, which looks exactly the same as the master database, is just a copy of the task database for this specific client. So every single day I go in and I check that done list and I just move it. I literally move the task over into the appropriate client, and then it just appears right here. And
I just want to jump in for a second, Jason, too. The reason I really, really love this, too, is I think a lot of freelancers, designers, developers kind of struggle to show what was done in a project, right? Especially if a project kind of goes sideways and you're like, well, I did all these tasks and stuff. This is just such an easy way that the client knows exactly what you're working on week by week. So I just think what you've done here in terms of like, here's what's upcoming, here's what I've done, here's what you've done, is just such a great way for clients to really see how a project is progressing and feel confident.
And to that point, I mean, like they know exactly where to come. Like they don't, like all of these resources and links and all the rest of it. Like I don't get emails anymore. Like, hey, what was that document again?
Yeah.
And then I got to go pull it from some buried email somewhere or some link somewhere else. They just come here. And I just share it as a public link, right? And they don't have another login. They don't have anything, here. They don't edit it. I know that some people need clients in a collaboration way. My clients just don't. And it's how I've built the business. And so this gives me a great insight into things. And I'm starting to, on a couple of clients, and I don't know why I didn't add it to this one, because maybe that's what I'll do after this. But a couple of clients, I add in things that have just like been complete game changers for them. Case in point, this client of mine, I've been working with them for close to a year. And on their page, it basically, I give them weekly insights. And that's the thing too, that I like about this is that all my clients are different and I provide different things. While a lot of it could be the same, it's different. And I could just update and on this page, and they don't have to, I don't have to kind of shoehorn my business into the tool. And that's what I really love about Notion is that the swipe stuff. Like I have like literally I have a hard drive of swipe files of landing pages, thank yous, emails, sequences, all sorts of stuff. And I'm slowly moving the stuff that I find into Notion now because they have the clipper and it's so easy to be able to do this. And I just add this as sort of an inspiration board, if you will, to my clients. And it's been super helpful for them. They're like, oh, this is great. Because this is the stuff that I feed off of, especially on the lead side of things, is sharing your education. Because if it's helpful for you and you then pass that education on to your clients, why not just allow them to see that? And so for me, this has been a complete game changer. And my clients, they love it. Like they just, they're like, this is so awesome. We get the email. Now it's not just like a bullet list of tasks anymore. There's like, we can see the whole spectrum of what we're doing. Everything sits in one repository while I'm like, yeah, this is what Basecamp and Asana can do. But at the same time, it's so flexible for me that I don't have to shoehorn anybody into it.
A couple quick questions came in. Jonathan was clarifying. So the copy is an actual copy rather than a related database. It's almost like a mirror, right? So you have these
Exactly.
client databases that are a mirror of your master task database. So that way, once you've completed a task and you send it into that database, it has the same schema, right? But but only that client can see that.
Yeah, and the only thing that I've removed from that schema is essentially the related database that goes to the projects, because my projects are all my projects, right? And so, which is probably a good point. I can share. It basically is a top-down sort of effect. Go clients and projects and tasks, which is pretty standard. But you can see here, this is gonna, once it loads, it's gonna have all the projects that I have worked on, but linked to clients. One of the tips, and this is something that I just did this week, was because of my move method with the tasks, I've had like the task database, like, I don't know, I couldn't even count how many times, right? And so what's funny for me is when I'm like, which database is this going into? Because the move screen is so small. So what I've done now is essentially created an icon per client. So I know which task database it is. And so, like if for this one, when I go to move this,
Command Shift P is your friend, everyone. It's the
absolutely,
best.
absolutely. And so when I look up tasks, like you can see, like I have so many different task databases, and yet I can't actually see sometimes what the, what client it's to. So I'm like, okay, how am I going to do that? Oh, okay. Yeah. Now I know which one
Emojis.
it is. Right. Exactly. So emojis are your friend when it comes to that sort of a thing. But it's super, it's been game changing for me because I can put everything into one spot. My clients are there. My home projects are there. I can see everything at a glance, and go all the way up the chain. Like everything, what inspired me about it was Marie's, talking about the month and the quarter and the year. Like I don't have nearly all this stuff filled out because I've only started basically in August, but just having all of this stuff here is super
One click
helpful for
away.
me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And one thing that I've always been mindful of, because for me, I had extreme burnout and depression in the early, like, I guess around 2010-ish. So I'm very mindful of my behavior, my feelings, my actions, and things of that nature. So one thing I do is I track all of that. And so there's certain tags and things like that. I journal a lot, so I can actually just see what on any given day, what sort of feelings I have, but I also do that per project, per client too. So
Mm-hmm.
it allows me some insight into where my headspace is and my mind space is, so that not too many days in a row, basically I'm feeling like crap. So,
Yeah, and I
like,
think even like doing the weekly review, like I know you mentioned you've got a
mhm,
review process too, but one thing I've started doing is in those properties at the top is I've added highlights and wins, and then also like challenges and uh, whatever you want to call lows and challenges. And so that way I can actually view my weekly entries and see all of the wins and also see all of the challenges. And when you start seeing things like overbooked, still overbooked, like
mhm.
it forces you to really notice what are those patterns and what decisions need to get made to kind of shift gears a little bit. So I think that tracking that and that awareness is so powerful.
Yeah, I mean, like case in point, my journal has always been very helpful for that sort of a thing. But like the way that Notion just has it is like, okay, well, Tuesday was a terrible day for me. Right? Like if I have too many red, like that's a problem, right?
Yeah.
Um, but like it's just to be able to see that like at a glance, like I could say like, okay, yeah, like the morning was okay, the afternoon, evening was terrible. Obviously this was a bad day. Okay, Wednesday was better, Thursday was better, right? Like, so I can take action on my feelings, and I don't have too many of those days in a row where I feel really scattered and pulled in different directions and things of that nature. So it helps me be able to do that.
And I'm assuming you feel pretty similarly, but I think it's so powerful personally to see my any of my personal tasks and my feelings as well as my business stuff. It's not necessarily intermingled. It is a little bit intermingled for sure, but I just find it so easy that I can see all of that in one place and I don't have to necessarily jump into different contexts or jump into different software to be able to just get what I need to get done.
And that's what was always a big struggle for me, was because I was like, okay, all my clients are in Asana, and then I use Todoist for a lot of my home stuff. And while that's fine, but it was like, okay, where do I go? Like you said, like the context switching was a pain for me, and I always wanted this like holistic, like, hey, what does my week look like? And I don't care in what
What
project it is.
content?
Yeah, like home life, kids, clients, whatever. And this allows me to see that, because essentially, like, like I have different color codings for things, like the blue stuff is personal, the red stuff are meetings, the green is podcast. So like I can look at my week and say, like last week was overbooked. I could just saw it. Like I had a lot of calls, and so not as much work that I'd like to be, get done was
Yeah.
done. But then even in just like this week's tasks and just seeing all of that together, I can then say, okay, you know what? I can't plan too much this week. I can't take, as many calls this week because I have a lot of stuff that's due. And, my wife says to me, like, hey, Wednesday, we need to do X, Y, and Z for the kids. I'm like, okay, well, now how do I move that stuff? And so just being able to see all of this kind of, one view for me has been like a complete game changer. Um,
So somebody asked, "What is power down?" Because I noticed that's on the bottom. I'm assuming that's your process
uh,
for wrapping up the day.
Yeah, exactly right. And that's something that I do every. I basically try to leave 15 minutes to a half an hour at the end of the work day to essentially inbox zero, or try to get there. move the tasks that I completed over into the next day. Also log any notes, because as you can see, like I did it yesterday. Probably should have left it, but like I have these shortcuts up here. So if I'm taking notes, I'm on a call, things of that nature, like this call, right? I'll move that into the appropriate project if need be, things of that nature. And I just basically shut down the day so that tomorrow I can just pick up and run with it without thinking about like, okay, what do I need to work on?
I think Tiago Forte references, and same with the Getting Things Done, David Allen, the sort of closing those open loops, right? Anything that's been kind of like floating around in your head that hasn't been processed and hasn't been put down, turned into a task, and just kind of cleared out. I think that's a key part of the process. There's a couple questions that have been coming in. I thought maybe we could jump in and answer a couple of them and then keep going. Let's see. How do I create views or link databases so that only some information in a database shows, like letting teams work together, but hiding some contact info that isn't name, email, phone number, etc.? And I mean, you probably work on your own in this space, right? So you're not necessarily working with a team per se, but I know that you can create groups. And so you can actually give different groups permission to see different different parts of your workspace, but permissions are based on a page level. So if you are sharing parts of a database, people will be able to see all of the entries in that database. So that's just something to be aware of. But I definitely recommend looking into the groups and sharing permissions as well. And maybe we can elaborate on that a little bit. Great question that came in from Emma was, I'd love to use Notion to work with clients. I'm a web designer, but mine tend to be non-techie type. So any advice there would be helpful. Also, until email is available, got any workarounds?
Yeah, so that's pretty much the case in point with my clients. They're not really, I mean, they are tech savvy, but they don't want to be, right? And so that's why I give them this kind of share screen, this client page, if you will. And it, like I said, it's just a shared, it's a shared screen that's public to anybody, but I only send the links out to them. And so for me, it's like, I share them every single week. And so I just make it super simple for them to set it up. Like I set it up for them, right? Obviously, but they don't have to do anything.
You have to give them the structure. Yeah.
Like I just tell them like, here, this is I walk them through what this looks like. Cause first time they were like, I don't even know what I'm looking at. What is all this? And because the thing is I usually just sent them an email of basically this. And then when I realized the power of Notion, I was like, oh, I could give them everything. Right. And so I do send them a weekly email that goes out prior to that regularly scheduled call, usually 6 to 12 hours before that call. So they have, pretty close up to date before the call. And I'd be happy to share what that looks like. But basically what I do is I take the share link from this page, drop it into a custom field in ConvertKit, and I just let ConvertKit send out the notification for it. And that for me has worked great over the past 2 months or so, because prior to that, I was essentially taking tasks that were done in Asana and dropping them into an email that I would have to then email on a regular basis out manually. And I'm like, I loathe that task every single week, right? And so this is like, I don't even have to worry about it. Like it just happens in the background, and it's so, for me, it's been super simple.
And I know some people might have more questions about this too, because I have a slightly different process, and I don't know if this is just based on the different types of work that we do. But I actually do invite my clients in as a collaborator, and so they each have their own like headquarters, and then that becomes our shared space that we work within that. And then I use the para method, like the projects, areas, resources, archives, because similar to Jason, I have some clients that I work with for like 2 years, and so we actually have mini projects even within our work together. So I kind of set up their projects, set up their areas. I kind of set up a client dashboard, and that's a template too. So I can say spin up new client headquarters. That kind of looks the same every time. gives the client that structure. So they're not like, where do I go to put this? I use as many call outs as I can to say, upload any relevant files here, do this here. And so many of you might have a lot of back and forth and collaboration with your clients. So as much as possible, I try to do a little bit of onboarding so that when they log in, they're not like, what the heck do I do? And I will say a lot of my clients are not techie whatsoever. And it's been way, way easier to collaborate inside of Notion than it has been in Asana. And for me personally, not having to switch my spaces all the time to kind of, I feel like I have a better sense of what's happening across all of the projects than I did with Asana having to like switch to different workspaces. So that's just again, another tip. Like there's a number of different ways I think you can decide on how you want to collaborate with your clients. Some of my clients, I'd say actually most of them now have their own Notion workspaces and their own accounts that they give me permission on. So that adds another layer of complexity there too. So really depends on your specific use case, but there's so many different ways you can set things up to work for you.
Yeah, I mean, I basically listened real early on with my clients on what they wanted and what they didn't want. And so that's why, for me at that time, I was like, okay, I was using Basecamp and I was trying to get my clients to use that. And they're like, oh yeah, I don't know what my login is or like whatever.
That's nice. Here's an email, right?
Yeah, exactly. And they would send me emails and I said, you know what, why am I trying to twist their arm to use something that they don't want to use? And I'll just use Help Scout. And then my system underneath, I could use whatever I want. And so that's why I switched to Asana and things of that nature. And I tried to get people to use Asana because that was a little bit, I don't know, I thought it was a little bit more organized than Basecamp. And then still the same. So my clients, like, they just didn't want. And so this is easy enough now because I've laid out this page that they now see every single week and we talk about it and things of that. Some of my clients were actually starting to now, I told them because we're collaborating on Google Docs and I'm like, we're just going to move all that stuff in here because there's no reason to use Google Docs and link out to Google Doc. We could just use Notion for it. And so
yeah, my Google Doc has definitely been reduced now that I'm using Notion. I do still think Google Docs they still have their place for sure. And especially if you're doing like a lot of collaborative back and forth editing of documents and that sort of thing. But for the most part, someone had asked why would I use Notion instead of my Google Docs plus project management. And again, I think you can probably see a lot of it is just having all of the data that you could ever need for the project lives in one place. And you're not trying to go, oh, where was that saved? Which drive, which folder, especially if you're working with teams and people name things differently and they have different habits with the way they format things, it can be a bit of a ride to try and figure out where things really live. So designing Notion as like the central source of truth, for branding guidelines, any files that you're ever going to need to reference, common links, that sort of thing. It just becomes this amazing home-based headquarters that, again, with the ability to design dashboards however you want. In Asana, you're having to there's a lot of clicks, I think, kind of going in, going out. It can be kind of unwieldy. And I just think having these sort of central databases that are designed the way that you need to access the information is so, so handy and shaves hours off of your project management time.
Yeah. And that's the thing, this page that my client gets, right? Like this portal, if you will, I just add the deliverables as it happens. Right? Like I don't have to, they see as this thing builds up, like what I've been doing. And this is some of the worksheets that I give my clients and, their current assets, as soon as I get these things, everything starts to live here. And then they do see the value in like, oh, all of this is here. Look at all the work that we've done. Right. And so, while this is just an aggregate of the past week, I can easily change the filters on this to do the whole thing, right? And so when you start to work with a client for any length of time, they start to see this page build up and really what the value you're bringing to them is. And it's not just, because ConvertKit setup, that's, that was the first thing that I worked with them, right? Like that could get lost in the shuffle because we're working on so many other different marketing things at this point in time, but it's always here. And so they know that, oh, okay, yeah. And they see that stuff. So that when they come back to me for another project or, renewal or whatever, they know what I've done. They can see that the track record's there. And this repository is something I don't have to constantly remind them, like, well, this is what we worked on, this is what we did, and so on and so forth. So this has been super helpful for me from a business perspective to also highlight the value and leave it in front of their face, if you will.
A couple other questions that came in I think are relevant are, can the clients comment? And I don't know if I know that, again, you share like a public link with your clients. And so I'm not sure if you use that functionality, but there are discussions at the top of every page. You can engage in discussion. Clients can highlight anything and comment on it. So I don't know if you use it in that way with your clients being able to comment on your pages.
Yeah, they haven't. I don't know that they need to. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't know that they look at this much more than the day that we have that call, unless they're actually looking up for something. But yeah, I mean, again, I evolve this, like, every single week I'm trying to improve it and things. And so for me, it's like, I have a couple of clients that I'm going to start bringing into Notion as collaborators. And so that comments might be, used then, but right now, not so much.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely, I'm a little bit more, I think, interactive with my clients. Like they do upload images. I know Emma was asking about that. Can they upload them to Notion? Yes. And again, very non-tech savvy clients that upload any kind of Word docs or files or whatever, any images. And then, for example, I often need to, very high res images. I upload those to Notion. In fact, why don't I share my screen with you momentarily to show you what it looks like on my setup. And we can, sorry, 1 second here. Okay, so here's an example of one client's HQ, and I leave little notes here for my clients too, like stay tuned, moving my materials over, because she's just getting started on Notion. But you'll see, like, I've got a project gallery for her, and because there are certain projects that she does over and over again, I will do, like, she does crowdcast events every month, and so if I open this up, you can see what this template looks like. And it's got all of the like pre-event, post-event areas to add an image and things like that. I'll jump into another client's because let's see, some of these are messy because we're just in the process of moving stuff over. But so it's like right click to download and save the icon, right? And that's a super easy page that I can share with that client, and they can right click. I've got little how-to videos in there. Here's how to update the Find a Therapist page, And again, to me, this is pretty messy, but it at least gives them everything that they need in one spot. I have a couple different, even like, here's your email guide, with a setup, instructions, billing, and things like that. I won't go too far into that because there's probably some sensitive info in there. But yeah, so my clients can comment on stuff. We've got this master tasks area as well, accreditable certificates. And so we've got this like back and forth discussion here, and here's the template, and she can comment in here and be like, oh, that's good feedback, whatever. So we're very much back and forth within this. Oh, can you still hear? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so this is an example of a client where we are back and forth very often. And again, client can upload images. She can do what she needs, and not very tech savvy at all. And this is why this space is super simple for her. She knows exactly where to go if she has any questions about the tech. There's a training library here. She can click into any of these, and there's Loom videos covering almost every piece of tech in here that she could ever need. Here's our old Google Doc. So I still embed things if we've got, documents that live elsewhere, and I just kind of pull them in here. And so before setting up her own little headquarters, I actually used to have this as a project. So I have, K9HS is a project. These are linked to my master task databases and things like that. Here's all of our meeting notes and things. But now that I'm sharing it with her and it's not just me working on this behind the scenes, I've created these kind of shared accounts and shared spaces. In some cases, some clients have their own, like they're entirely their own workspaces here that they share with me. Same with Egghead, like they've given me permission here. And so I can jump in here, do whatever tasks I need to do. Yeah, so it really depends. There's so many different ways you can collaborate with clients, and you can do it in a way that makes sense for you. In some cases, I will actually share the top level of this. So let me, like Productized Offers is a course that I'm working on with Kai. It's on hold right now. If I open this up as a page, this is actually shared with Kai. You can see Kai Davis up there. He's coming on for future office hours. And so these are tasks that are actually not part of my master task database. These are just tasks for Kai and I to share together. We can assign to each other and that sort of thing. Shared assets, things to use for reference, call notes. Every time we'd have a call, we can link it up to next steps, right? And this becomes an interactive project that both Kai and I can work on. It's got, my master task database here as well. So like these pages can look however you want. They can be quite interactive. They can be quite simple. And it really depends, I think, on the tech savviness of your client. So it looks like there's a lot of, it probably couldn't handle the amazing screen share. So I'm going to pull up some of these questions too, because I know there's a bunch here. And we may approach it differently too. So I think it's just good to talk about these different scenarios. But Emma asked another question is how you think about one-off projects versus ongoing maintenance clients. Is that an area versus a project? This is for someone who uses the para method of organizing. So I noticed in some of your pages, you had these like mini projects under there, but they were just like one-liners. So how do you think about ongoing maintenance versus maybe a set project that has a start and end date? Like, how do you treat that?
So yeah, I treat them the same, right? And so anything's a project. Like even if it's a repeatable project, what I do is I essentially create a template of those tasks so that I tick them off. When I tick them off, I create the template again, it lists it, and then I move it into the master database. And so it's just like this eternal cycle of just deleting tasks and re-adding the same ones because, there's no way to do recurring tasks. And that's one of my, I guess, sticking points, but maybe we'll get there. And so it's just a workaround for me, one-off projects. The thing that I got stuck on was the one-off projects that are custom. You have smaller projects in there. So I'm like, do I make another project within the bigger project? Or if it's just a roll-up of tasks that I just need to iron out, I didn't realize I could relate tasks to tasks. And so when I found that out, I was like, oh, that's super simple. Like, magical. So now I just have to, right. So now I just like, if I have to call somebody and then follow up with somebody, and then I have to do stuff waiting on them on the calls, let's say, like those are just 3 tasks in a larger task, if you will. And so it's easy enough for me to just, hey, I just create an upper level task and then put those 3 tasks underneath. So I look at them all the same. They're all projects. And then the tasks go underneath those projects, if that makes some sense.
Yeah, and I think I treat it kind of similarly. Like, for example, if we're talking about para, like with Tiago Forte's setup, projects, areas, resources, archives, Notion is an area because I do a lot of projects within Notion, or like these office hours, they're like a regular thing that I do every week. But I also have Notion projects, which feel like they're smaller, like working on a course or whatever. And that kind of has a start and end date. So I do have areas that, things that I want to reference often, I would put as an area. And then anything that is a bit more of a fixed thing that has like regular ongoing tasks, I would set up as a project. I think a lot of that's up to personal preference. I don't really stick really strictly to Tiago setup. And I think part of that too is Notion can do tasks. So the para method is for organizing digital information. It's not necessarily for task management. Notion can do all of those things. So I think it makes a lot more sense to kind of increase not just para, but I've got tasks, journal, inbox, dashboard, all of these different things together. So I think you really have to play with it and figure out what works for you, and not be afraid to deviate a little bit from the system.
Yeah, and it took me a little while because I'm a little bit of a perfectionist and I want things just right. And so it took me a little bit while to figure out, like, okay, things are just going to change. Like, I just need to put it in here and then figure it out. Like, case in point, the podcast, right? So I had a whole different process elsewhere. And it wasn't a part of my project management. It was just like Pipedrive was a huge thing for it, as far as booking the guest and producing, show notes, like, and the whole 9 yards was basically a glorified Kanban board in Pipedrive. But the thing for me was, like, now with the next season, I've started to put at least the back end after the recording into Notion. And so my podcast is a project with repeatable tasks for essentially every single episode that I have to do. And so I created these little, templates that have the same tasks. And so that every show is essentially now a task. And underneath that show, if you will, we'll have all of those tasks there as well. So that's probably going to change because I've literally only set that up 2 weeks ago. So it's already changed. But
yeah,
giving yourself the permission to know that this is as flexible as you want it to be, and really the limitation is your creativeness in it. And so I put it in and see how it goes, and then I change it later.
It's going to start messy for sure. And, we were just talking before we went live, just how much things have changed. And I think you were saying it was 2 months ago that you set up your Notion. For me, it's been almost exactly 1 year. Almost exactly. So it has taken so long to really get it to the point that it really works for the way that I want and need to work. So even like, Ben and I collaborating together and then realizing, actually, I think we need to separate our master task databases because I don't need all these features for like the software development side of things. I don't want all of that data to be tracked in a task. It doesn't really make sense for my use cases. So maybe we actually need separate task databases. That's something that you don't really know until you're in the thick of it and you're using it. So whether you have other team members, whether you need to collaborate with clients or not, whether you're just looking for a bullet journal replacement or weekly agenda, it's going to evolve. And I think one comment I've heard people say is like, oh, I discover something new and then I have to like rebuild everything. But you really don't have to rebuild. You can move data so easily with that Command-Shift-P. It's like the best, the best shortcut ever. And it's really easy to change your mind. If you've got a list of pages and you want to dump them in a database, Command-Shift-P, drag them in. So you can really manipulate the data very, very easily and kind of rework things if it's not working for you.
And I'll peel back the curtain a little. Like those pages that I showed you for my clients, those are the best looking ones. Right? Like the earlier ones, they're still just like literally just a list of tasks. Like I'm not bringing the swipe file in there. Like it just looks terrible. So, and the thing is, it's fine for them. They don't, like I will go back and change them around. But I basically took a couple of the newer clients that I have and that I'm engaged with, people that haven't been with me for a long time. Like, you obviously want to impress them. And so, I work on their portal a little bit more so than the people that are, hey, they're just like, hey, this is awesome. I can just go to this any day. I don't have to wait the week for, the email. So, it changes over time.
Yeah. I would love for you to show, if you're open to it. Jason has this awesome process where he sends people their Notion share link as a custom field in his ConvertKit. So he's got this process set up so it's like automated every week. The client gets their update. And I really love that process. That's something I'm definitely going to be stealing. So let me know if you're willing to share.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me just pull up ConvertKit and then share the screen that way. I think that's probably going to be the way to do it. So that one page, I basically, there's going to be a little inception here, I think.
I always drag the window into a separate window and then.
Yeah, I probably should have done that. But basically what it is the share link, if you will, of that page, you just grab that. And I have a sequence in ConvertKit. Now, this is a totally different application with its own nuances and things. This is literally an email that I send out every single week. It's the same email over and over and over again, maybe a little different text, just to whatever, asking for referrals and testimonials. It's a different crowdcast in and of itself. But this link in here is their
So
client
beautiful.
dashboard, right? And so every single week, they're going to get an email that contains their link. And so I don't have to now, this is basically an email that I used to write up and bullet point, grabbing the done tasks from Asana and sending out this thing manually. Now I don't have to worry about it. I know that these going to get these emails every single week. I don't have to remember. I don't even have to be around for it, like to send it out before the calls and things. And this is just a custom field that I store on the subscriber record. Yeah, it's not going to find it because it's not an actual
Not a
link.
real link,
but yeah, it just goes over into and I have
just makes you look so organized. You're just on the ball like every week.
Well, I mean, to that point, I basically am like,
right, Jonathan?
I'm an automation guy, right? And so I try to do anything I can and automate it. I'm a developer too, so I'm really lazy.
It's like, how can I optimize this, right? How can I not?
Like I was trying to figure out, and so, and case in point, like if you work with clients in a certain way. So here's another, and I just happened to stumble upon it, right? So I work in ConvertKit and Drip.
You're blowing people's minds here.
So anybody using ConvertKit or Drip, and this swaps that out automatically. And so, that's a little bit of the communication and word of mouth stuff that I talk a lot about, but that's a different broadcast, I guess. But
lots of people are excited about that one. That's awesome. Let's check out some of the questions too, because I know there's still lots more. I think we covered like why should I use Notion instead of my current project management app in Google Docs, because everything lives in one place, everything's findable. The client's never going to ask you like, where do I find that thing? How do I bookmark that? So I think that's a pretty strong case for that. For context, are you the only one using this or facilitating your projects, or is this used by a team? We covered that one. Are there ever issues with clients having legal requirements that prevent them from using Notion themselves? Do you ever have to switch over to other software to work with clients like those? I personally have never had to worry about that kind of issue. That might be like a really unique or obscure use case where like maybe there's health requirements, right? Like there's HIPAA compliancy or something like that. So I would say I'm not super equipped to answer that question.
I worked for a design agency that was specifically in the medical field, and there was all these HIPAA compliancy issues and things, but in my own business, I don't have to deal with that.
Yeah, sorry guys, not sure how to answer that one. Did you replace your bullet journal by this completely?
Yes, I have. My son actually has my bullet journal because he was playing with it before. So yes, I have completely the outside, and it's slowly, right? So like I've brought in all my other layouts too for movies, quotes, all the rest of it, like slowly going into Notion as well. So
yeah. Any other questions that or things that you guys want to see a little more behind the scenes on? I know that you were mentioning Pipedrive. So has Notion, I know that the API is not ready yet. And so there's probably a lot of stuff that's still a little bit manual, but I'm curious, has Notion replaced your Pipedrive, or do you still use Pipedrive? Or
I still use it mainly because of that API, to be honest. But also because Pipedrive for me, when I found it, it was like that was I was like, oh, activity-based selling. I get that. It was like this click in my head. And so just to be able to set something on the calendar right after I already complete a task, just the idea of that, my head wrapped around nice and easily and took a lot of thinking from me away. So again, it's definitely going to be the API is available and that sort of thing inside of Notion. It's going to be easy for me to take that one client, like when I win a deal, and move it over. It could be even just giving the lead, like some of the thoughts that I've had, like, going on the geeking side of things is like, hey, I could give them, because I have follow-ups for leads to sell them and educate them and things of that nature. I could give them an insight into what the swipe file looks like. I could give them a
Yeah.
knowledge base of useful ConvertKit or drip articles or, things of that nature that are inside of, Notion that could be super powerful to just augment that.
You bring up a good point too, and something I wanted to share with people is case studies is an awesome thing to do. Like anytime I finish a new project, create a new case study, and then there's some relational databases happening in here, but I'm tagging what were the services provided, the tech used, the summary, etc. And then I've got like a whole breakdown of like what happened in the project. And then when I send out a proposal, I embed these case studies, and I can also filter those and say, only show me everything that's got online courses or whatever. So that's something I do rely on pretty heavily as well. Sharing a tech tools database too. So like, these are my top recommended tech. Here's what it costs per month. And what I can do is tag a client so that and I give it a status too, where it's like worth considering, highly recommended. And then I will send this to my clients as well. So they have a little bit of a blurb of like, here's why you should sign up for this. Airtable, I have must have in there, and same with Notion and things like that. So on a per client basis, when I first onboard them, I can embed this gallery in their space and just filter it by, project contains their client name, and then they're going to see the tools that I recommend for them specifically. So especially, Emma, if you're a web designer and you're saying, hey, I need your logins, I also might need you to sign up for a new ConvertKit account or this or that. That's an easy way to kind of get your client to do that. And you can also include your affiliate links in there too. I think I've got there, it's not awesome. Actually correct, but that's just, again, the ability to kind of embed your databases within these client onboarding documents. You can say, like my proposals, for example, have embedded my embedded case studies and a couple other things in there too. So there's lots of interesting ways you can use it, I think, to just really make the whole client experience feel really good. It's like that swipe file, right? Like I definitely include the swipe file and say, oh, it sounds like this client needs some help with their email content. It's not very strong, right? Like maybe they're not very experienced. Here are some really great examples of this, and I'll have, must see or must use. Maybe I'll open up my swipe file just to show you.
Yeah, I mean, to your point there, like I have an onboarding sequence that goes over the course of a month, and it's asking for things like, Google Analytics access and ConvertKit access, or and so on and so forth. And then just even throughout the month, they get an email that says, "Hey, we've been working together now for 21 days. Just you have any questions?" And so, what I've thought about doing is my next step is bringing that onboarding process, all of those emails into their client portal as well, so that they always have that there. They always know exactly how to get a hold of me, what times they need to do. They don't have to go dig for that email and things of that nature. So it's super powerful to just have your client go to one spot and be able to see everything.
Love that. Someone asked you to use LastPass with your clients to access their data. I use 1Password personally. It's really hard to break my clients of the habit of sending me their logins by email. But yeah, I definitely use 1Password and LastPass. Another question that came in was someone asking about putting all their Instagram hashtags in it. Absolutely. And I personally use Instagram hashtags with Text Expander, which I've mentioned in a past office hours. And so if I just type in like IGGAR, that's like gardening hashtags, and that will automatically spit out that snippet. I think it's great to store those snippets too within Notion as well, but Text Expander might help in terms of a workflow of like actually being on your phone and typing that out and having it spit that out. But absolutely, I think building your Notion space as having like a playbook, if you want to call it, like here's how things operate here in my business, having all that documentation of just like, here's how we do things, here's our technical stack, here's how we talk to clients, especially if you've got a team. I think it's really good to include that stuff.
I've started transitioning over and I'm a team of one, right? The only contractor I have is Adam, who does my podcast production, but I basically have this Google Drive of SOPs, standard operating procedures, and I've started to migrate those over into Notion so that, looking for contractors now, I could just share that there, and I don't have to go digging for it, and it's just a part of the team, if you will. And so, yeah, it's like digging around in Google Drive for me is like the bane of my existence, and
Yeah.
it
Yes.
just, but it's like a necessary evil that's just there, and I've dealt with it, but I don't have to now. Like Notion makes it that way. So,
Yeah. Somebody did ask about whether we can provide templates for this. I do have some templates if you go to notion.mariepoulin.com. But the thing is, these templates are so heavily reliant on relational databases that I really think it probably makes sense to build some of this on your own. I do have some walkthroughs and how-to videos of how to do that. And I have one upcoming of like how to actually build this sort of master dashboard and sort of master weekly planner that connects to other projects and things like that. So yeah, you can reach out and hopefully we can, like I have,
yeah.
I do have a number of templates here like this that are all interconnected, but yeah, it's very dependent on your own databases. So it can be a
Yeah.
little tricky.
And the thing that I gained inspiration from Marie about was basically just watching the videos and then seeing if I could recreate what I liked, and just on a blank page to kind of see like, oh, okay, oh, so this is how this works. And that's kind of how, I just built out some of the templates that I have. And, while, Marie was gracious enough to, share a couple of those URLs in a video or something of that nature, I basically just rip and run with my own, because it like how you work and how your brain works, that's what needs to go into Notion, not necessarily what somebody else is doing. And I learned that from the bullet journaling experience, just seeing how people use it, and like, oh, that's a pretty cool thing to do. Like I never really thought about that. And so how do I do that? Because that's useful, right? And so you really, and then the shortcut keys, like you start to learn how
Yes.
like I'm a shortcut key. Like if I have to use my trackpad, it's kind of annoying. And so like I want to know what the shortcut keys are. And so you become a lot faster in that way.
Definitely familiarize yourself with some of those shortcuts. Like the Command Shift P is my favorite. I'm always moving data around. And someone asked about the dashboard too. Again, the dashboard I think totally depends on how you work. Like what's the information or data that you want and need to see on a regular basis. In some cases, like for example, some of the team members at egghead.io, they've got this like, free form, whatever, just things I, brain dump need to do today. But if that becomes a more substantial task and you're like, oh, this is going to require a little bit more data or information, I can drag that over here. I can assign a date to that, get a little bit more specific. So it really depends on what's going to be most helpful for you. I think both Jason and I pretty heavily rely on our weekly planner here. And again, this is where I can put those 3 words in there that represent the week. I can put my effectiveness in there. I can, see my project focus at a glance. So one click takes me to exactly all the details of that client information and such. So for me, this is kind of like my dashboard. It's like, what's coming up this week? What are the tasks I need to take care of? And what's my weekly reflection? So that's kind of how I operate.
And the thing that I found with shared templates, even the default templates are great. Like you can get, Notion has a whole bunch of default templates that you can bring in. I find that like I'll wind up just pushing down the actual structured template part and making my own on top of it. And I'm like, oh, you know what? I never used this other thing. So I just I get rid of it, because you find that you start to see the opportunities in here, and like expand your brain. Like the time that I realized that I could just recursively link, database records, for me was like mind blowing. I'm like, oh, that's what I've been looking for. How come I didn't know about this? And so it's a way in which you can really get what you need out of it, and as well as your clients. And so if you really understand your clients, and that's why for me, my clients, I kind of know what they need and what is extraneous for them. So on that page, I don't add anything that they don't really need or want. And so it just creates a better experience for them.
And I think, to that point, I create these project templates. So it's like spin up new project. It looks the same, but I will edit that and simplify it if need be, right? Because some clients don't need all of that information. And so it's good to have a starting point, but then to switch things around as need be. One thing that I noticed that I sort of recently discovered that you can do, I created this all client tasks dashboard. And so these are all embedded that client's master task database. This is this client's master task database and vice versa. So this can be one way that I can pull everyone's tasks all together in one space so that I can see it all here. And if I click on this original database, that's actually going to take me into that client's workspace here. So you can actually jump.
Oh,
right? Like I didn't actually realize I can pull a master
that's
task
awesome.
database that lives in an entirely different setup, someone else's workspace. So again, if you have a client that has their own space and they're giving you permission into that, that's again a fairly recent discovery. But so now I've got
I would
that.
have never even tried to do that. Like I would have
Yeah,
just thought, like, how do I bring that in? Like I would have done
there we go.
so much duplicate entry.
And this might be something that you want to include in your own dashboard. Like maybe at the top, you would want to have something like, today, and you can put your own, start putting your own stuff in there. You could set this up however you want, but you kind of give yourself this dashboard that, again, if you manage multiple clients and they all have their own space. So if I jump to hers, for example, that's taking me into her shared space here, whereas some of them are actually taking me into other shared. So it's a way to just kind of bring all of that data together in one place, which was not something that I was ever able to do in something like Asana. So that's just been pretty mind-blowing and awesome.
Oh, that's I didn't know you could do that. That's
yeah, some
cool.
some people's minds were blown in the chat. I know. It's like, how did I not know this was possible? And I think, again, just the more that I use Notion and the more that I love it and the more that I set my client spaces up, they're like, wow, this is amazing. I see how I can manage all of my chaos of my brain in Notion. So they go off and set up their own accounts, which then changes the nature of the collaboration. So then I'm having to adapt my spaces to make sure that I can collaborate with them easily. They still have their own setup and stuff like that. So it is kind of rapidly evolving. And I'm always like having to like, ooh, okay, no, swerve. Okay, we'll do this. And there's just lots of possibilities. So amazing. Okay, so we're coming up on the hour. I really appreciate all this time. I don't know if there's any other major questions that we should answer as we're wrapping up here. We will do, there's always new stuff like this that we're covering in office hours. So if something does come up, definitely reach out to us, reach out to the team. If there's something that you want us to cover in more detail, I try to record video every week too, with some of the questions that come up in these office hours. Any restrictions on what can then be seen on the other sides? I mean, the permission is based on pages, right? So my clients can't see this page, but they can see their own master task database. So there's tons of great documentation. Make sure to click on the question mark here too, and check out the help and support guide around sharing. But templates are your friend.
Yeah, Robin was asking about how do you track like updates on WordPress blogs and things of that nature. So that's what I do for my recurring tasks. So I basically just create on that client what I need to do on a recurring basis as a template. And then when I check that off in whatever day or week that I'm working on, I go to that client and create them again. Unfortunately, there's no such thing as recurring at this point in time. Hopefully, Notion.
Well, one thing I've done for a client was we actually set up in her master tasks, there's a field that's like a selector that is recurring. And so then she actually separated out her tasks in a little area that's like, just show me the recurring. It's like a filtered view. It's not necessarily ideal, but then she basically just needs to reset the reminder date week by week. So it's not perfect, but
and it all comes down to how much insight you want to give to your clients, right? So the reason why I do it that way is so that I can move those tasks over into their own task database so that they see that stuff was done. If it was just something that was internal to me, like my own website and things, I just create the one task and I just basically to move the due date. Like that's all I really do.
Yeah.
So
Rod had a question about if you have a filtered view that you've created for your client, are they able to create a new filter that might show more than their items? Yes, absolutely. And so that's why you do need to be careful. If you're showing a filter database for that client, that's your master task database, that client can go all tasks and they can see the entire thing. So that's something to be aware of for sure. And that's why, again, it takes some time to design up your databases and things so that those permissions are taken into account.
Yeah, that was my biggest problem with the master database, because I was
Exactly.
exposing like my shelf in the back, like my shelf in the bathroom project, like to my clients. If they actually traversed up, they could see everybody's tasks. So I didn't want that. So having their own task database that just unlinked the projects so that they can't go any higher was the key for me. And I was just like, okay, what also that does for me is move the tasks from the master task database, so that doesn't become unwieldy.
Yeah.
Right. And so I don't know, I haven't been in there long enough where that database is going to become slow or anything like that. I don't know that that's a problem, but as a developer, I kind of know that sometimes as things grow, it's not thought about, the optimization might happen. But so this actually solves that problem.
Yeah. And on that point about optimization too, I think with every new project I'm optimizing, I don't go back and I don't try and make old projects look all nice and fancy. It's sort of like, just keep improving it as you move along and don't worry too much about old projects. Like that's not, I think, the best use of our time necessarily. So,
right. Yeah. As needed. Like that's basically, like I said before, like my old clients that only got the list of tasks, that's all they have on their client portal. Right?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I'm just not going to build out, I'm not going to go find all their deliverables and all that stuff. It's just, they have it. And if they need it, then I'll add it to that.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you for being so generous in showing your workspace. It's really great to see how other people are using it. In your client work process, are you integrated knowledge in Oki? I'm not sure what you mean there, Gerwin. You could always shoot me an email too. I'm happy to elaborate on any of this stuff. And again, if there's anything that you want me to create a video about in more detail to show you how I do that, I do have one coming up next week. That's the weekly planner from scratch. So hopefully that's helpful. Thank you everyone for coming. Next week, if you guys are curious, we do have Thomas Frank, who's going to show us his YouTube workflow, which I'm really excited about. So thank you everybody for joining us on your Friday morning or evening, wherever you're joining us from. Don't forget to click on the Notion name at the top of your screen too, if you want to see a list of all of our future events and past events too, if you want to join us. So thank you so much, Jason, for
thanks for having me.
Being willing to.
I love doing this stuff.
This
I could geek out all day.
And we will. There will be more, I'm sure. Awesome. Thanks everybody for coming. Have a great rest of your day.
See you, everyone.